got into aviation photography primarily because my family had a military background, always around aviation. My grandfather would always take me out to Bergstrom Air Force Base and we'd watch F-4s launch out of the base, talk about a wonderful time as a kid.
My introduction to airplanes was my dad. One of my first memories of aircraft is being a very small child and being put in the seat of an F4. And I remember looking around, seeing bunches of gauges and switches and canopy rails. And at that point, I was hooked. As soon as I kind of became aware of airplanes and knew what a camera was, I wanted to take pictures of airplanes. So it's been a lifelong obsession, really.
I was going to UT Arlington here in this local area, Arlington, Texas, and I just got bored one day. So I went out to Navy Dallas, went over there just to watch planes, as a lot of people do. And I met a group of people out there that were really cool, that hung out there, looked like they knew what they were doing. Didn't have a camera, didn't have anything. But I saw they did and was watching what they were doing and said, you know, this looks like would be fun, better than just watching the planes, is maybe taking pictures.
Growing up, because of his hobby, it kind of got me to, I was around aviation a lot. And then when I was about a sophomore, maybe a junior in high school, we went out to DFW airport, and then he let me use his camera. And from that day on, I just got hooked because it was something that I saw my dad do. It's like, and that's something that I wanted to do. It was just something that now me and him have been doing together for 10 years, and it's been some of the happiest times. And, you know, to share that with him and to have all that fun, it's been great ever since. I've enjoyed it.
My dad took me to my first air show. I think it was in 1989 at Focal Air Base, and that was the 10-year anniversary of the F-16 in the Dutch Air Force. And so it was massive, you know. It was so packed with people, you know, boys and girls, and I was really fascinated by that. I'm an aerospace engineer, so I love the background behind the aviation, behind airplanes, the technology that goes into aviation. So to be able to document that in a picture is fulfilling for me.
I got into aviation like at a pretty young age. I think I was 7 or 8, as far as I can remember, when I saw the Starfighters, the legendary jet F-104, fly over my house. And ever since I captured that image, I knew like, hey, I love airplanes. And the best thing you can do as a photographer in aviation is to go up in the sky and catch airplanes in air-to-air photography. But that was very, very hard to actually get a chance to do that. And so by the time I was a little bit older, I tried to create that chances myself. And yeah, it worked step by step by step. My first air-to-air was in 1987 when I had a chance to fly with the Alpi Eagles. That is an Italian team flying 4 Marchettis. And so they took me flying during the actual training. I never heard of G-forces, didn't know what a looping was, but when I looked up and I saw the cows there in the farm field, and I knew, all right, this is cool. And I made some pretty good pictures, and ever since 1987, I've been doing it.
My dad was a fighter pilot in the Air Force, and he had a camera at that time. And so I've always been around airplanes and just kind of developed the desire to see airplanes, and then got the camera bug and kind of caught the disease at that point.
I got into photography pretty heavily in high school. Loved taking pictures. Did a lot of military stuff via a friend that was in the Air National Guard, and was introduced fairly early to one of the Air Force's top aerial photographers at the time. His name was Michael James Haggerty, and he was a photographer for Airman magazine and became a mentor of mine very quickly. And he showed me what the pros did and how they did it, not only to make great photos, but also to do it safely. He always stressed safety, which has turned into my mantra as well as I mentor people now. I joined the Air Force in 1996. I walked into the recruiter and said, I want to be an Air Force photographer. And the recruiter actually laughed at me. And he said, nah, we're kicking people out. I actually had my portfolio in my truck. And I walked out to my truck and I walked back in and I said, I don't think you understand. I want to be an Air Force photographer. And I had about 10 photos that were mounted. And they were pretty exciting, dynamic stuff. And I slammed them down on the desk in front of them in a very cocky, 22-year-old way or whatever it was. And I said, this is what I do now. And the first one was 2 F-15s going straight up. So the recruiter looked at my portfolio and looked up at me and said, let me make a few phone calls. And so he did, and I had a guarantee in my contract when I signed up that if I made it through basic training and if I made it through tech school, that I could be an Air Force photographer. So it's been a wild ride.
This was all grab a camera and try it. No formal training at all. I started out with Canon AE1 program, film cameras, which were pretty decent equipment back in the early 80s and 90s, and it was a good platform to learn with. They were manual cameras, manual focus, and then entered the digital world about 2012 when I bought my first Canon 7D. And that's basically what I'm using now, are 7Ds and Canon lenses.
It's all self-taught. Everything I've done has been through trial and error. Quite a bit of error when you start, especially, working with the different types of film. Slide film was a bit of a learning curve for me. Started out shooting prints and then going to slides. Everything was a little bit different because of the ISO settings and everything else. But it's through trial and error I became better and better. And of course, once the digital age hit, that changes everything as far as the ability to take many more pictures and find a couple that are good out of that. With slide, you couldn't afford to do that.
Originally, back in the day, everybody shot with slide film. Some people would bring out 20 rolls of 36 exposure Kodachrome. I would have like 5 rolls because I was a struggling college student. So when I took my shots, it was usually of a static nature. And if sunlight had to be really good, usually early morning shots, that sort of stuff on the ramp. Didn't catch a whole lot other than maybe a landing shot of stuff. So as things progress, digital comes into play, then I got to be more of a creative photographer in that respect because I could deal with the settings post, production type stuff. And so I took a lot more chances, got better lenses, so I was able to shoot more of the plane, the aesthetics of an aircraft, the lighting, that sort of stuff. So a lot of the courses I've taken in terms of photography have been along those lines with like Photoshop, things like that, to be able to draw that contrast out. So used to be a backlit, throw it in the trash can. Now backlit, no, I'll take something with that, make something pretty out of that, nice and aesthetically pleasing. So that's kind of the difference between then and now.
The old style of doing stuff was a lot of fun, but everything was manual. The good thing is you learn how to take pictures really well, and you have a maximum 36 exposures. So when I was still using that camera, for every 36 exposures, I had at least 25 really good photos. And strangely enough, even today, with the gun mode, I still do I aim and I still do chick, 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 chick. While other guys take 50 pictures, I take 5 or 6.
Switching from film or slides to digital, I've noticed that I shoot a lot more. So when I was shooting film, of course, it was expensive, especially for, a 14 or 15-year-old, right? So going to digital, it was so much easier, to just shoot everything that you see. And then when you come home and you didn't like something, you just delete it, and move on. No harm, no foul.
To me, that's the fun part of photographing with aviation, is especially on the military side, is it's just like hunting. When you go sitting in the stand, you don't know what you're going to see. It could be nothing at all to everything flying in the day. And, sometimes I'm just looking for something, just to see F-16, F-35, especially around here, just to have something in the air. Obviously from the photography side, I would really look, for those banking shots, those nice low approach shots, things like that. But I really don't go hunting for anything in particular unless I know something is happening, obviously, which is very rare. It's very rare that we're in the know of what's going on. But to me, that's part of the fun of it, is you don't know what you're going to get when you go out there, which is the reason why we all do it, right? It's the reason we go out there, because you don't know what you're going to see that day. And I guess the best answer is I don't really look for anything, but, obviously, as any photographer would, you love looking for those beautiful, nice takeoff shots and nice low approach bank shots over you at the top, things like that. And yeah, just kind of enjoying from that end of it.
As aviation photographers, aviation doesn't always come to you Especially nowadays, you have to go out and seek that special aircraft that you're after. When I started, I was definitely a plane spotter. If you got word, that a specific aircraft was visiting somewhere, then, you jumped in the car. I started young, so for me it was bicycles and trains and buses, try to get to an airbase, try to catch whatever was coming in. So a good story for me, at least, one that I really, hold dear to my heart, is going out with friends in about 1990-ish. And we were after the USS John F. Kennedy. It was moored in the south of England in Southampton. And so we were driving at night, trying to go across the channel, from the Netherlands. And so a long drive after school. And so we ended up in Southampton. And we were going to camp in the wild, just to save a buck or two. So we found this place that we thought, was a park, where we could basically pitch a tent, and park the car. Well, it ended up being a golf course. And so when we woke up, we looked outside the tent, and here's all these people that were already playing their game, wondering what was going on with this tent, on the golf course. And there's a lot of those stories that you go through doing this hobby, I would say. Going out with friends and, just having a blast, I mean, that's for me, what it really is about, just having fun. And then, of course, you get to watch these guys do their professional job in military aviation and admiring, what they do for us.
Going out and taking photographs of airplanes, I find very cathartic. No stress. I have no expectations when I leave the house. Unless I'm going to an event like an air show, pre-arranged visit, and then, the expectation is, well, you're going to hopefully see something that catches your eye. If it's just a normal day, having a day out with airplanes, I have no expectations, as they say. Any day shooting airplanes will beat every day at work, every time. A lot of my favorite photographs aren't necessarily of subjects which are that interesting. Some of the photographs are of interesting subjects that aren't terribly good quality, but each one has a story that goes with it. Having a good story, a good background behind the photograph, where it was taken, the circumstances, comes part of the way I look at my favorite photographs. One of my favorite photographs is of an Egyptian MiG-21 I took on the ground in Egypt at an Egyptian Air Force base, and it was probably the closest I ever went to going to jail for taking a photograph. The Egyptian Air Force were very adamant that there'd be no cameras, and I had run out of film. I was on my last roll of 36 exposure Kodachrome, and this MiG-21 came in, and I knew I had maybe 2 shots left on the camera. The Egyptian security was walking up and down, and I sneakily took a couple of photographs. And one of the Egyptian guards kind of saw me, and I very delicately pressed the rewind button with my thumb. And my hands were big enough that I could actually start to rewind the film back into the canister while he was trying to talk to me, and he wasn't looking at what my hand was doing. And then at the end of it, he's, open your camera, and I was more than happy to open it because there was a film canister in there that was already returned to its slot. Now, that was a very memorable photograph. It's not a fantastic photograph, interesting subject, but the story behind it is much more memorable for me.
Targets of opportunity. First and primary is any aircraft that we don't see normally in this area. Transient aircraft or aircraft types. And it's pot luck whether you will see that in a given day or not. With our local base here, Fort Worth, there is the expectation of getting the locally based F-16s and F-35s flying out of Lockheed Martin. It's a mixed bag. You're hoping for new stuff, but you're expecting to get some of the local stuff at the same time. So you kind of plan on both. We actually have examples of a perfect or near perfect photo day for our purposes that happen here occasionally. Hurricane evacuations, where a hurricane will threaten the southeast United States, and most of those bases will evacuate their aircraft rather than risk having them damaged. Navy Fort Worth is a prime location for some of those aircraft to bug out to. So we've had occasions where we'll go out there and catch over 100 airplanes that are not based in the Navy base come in a day of multiple types from multiple bases. That's fun, and you know that a whole lot of stuff is coming in and a lot of variety. So that's a rich target of opportunity for our hobby. Favorite photos. There have been so many and so many different types, but I think my favorites are ones that I took of my cousin. I was flying with the Lone Star Flight Museum out of Galveston. He was a chief pilot at that time. And I went up in their B-25 and hung out a porthole on the side of it and took pictures of him while he was flying the B-17 in formation with us. And I think those were some of the most satisfying pictures I've ever taken, because it was an incredible aircraft and somebody who was close to me who was flying it at the time. That was fun. And I still look back at those photographs with a lot of fondness.
For a photographer, there is nothing better than a flex departure at Nellis during a red flag, or even at Nellis Air Force Base in general if you're lucky enough to photograph out there.
Typically during red flags, they take off to the north, and depending on the mission that these guys are flying, they either go straight out north and follow the highway into the desert, or they take a flex departure, which basically makes a steep left turn over the motor speedway that's located just north of the airbase.
My experience with flex departure is asking for an understanding that you're going to receive an opportunity to, as soon as the wheels come up, the gear's going to come up, and you're going to head to your military operating area in most cases in an expedited manner. So that's often an opportunity to kick burner, pull a lot of G's going right out, and you get some vapors coming off the wingtips. And it's usually a pretty exciting time for both the occupant of the airplane as well as people that may be photographing it down there.
Last year we went to red flag. We had an F-35 pilot who, I don't know, he didn't even have it maybe 1,000, 2,000 feet above the ground, kept it very, very low force, and I mean, he turned that stick and he came right over the top of the car, shook the ground, shook the cars and everything, and it just sent a chill down your spine when he yanked over the top of you. And that's a rare occasion. I'm sure, you know, that doesn't happen all the time, but if a pilot feels gracious that day, he'll bless you with a really good flex departure.
Got an airplane that's launching and then basically aiming right at you in full afterburner at a low altitude. And at least the local pilots who are there, who know the photographers are down there by the raceway waiting for them, are putting on a show. And if the lighting is right and you got the right type of aircraft, incredible photographs can be had out there. And just the thrill of having an F-35 go over your head at 200 feet in full afterburner is just awesome.
I am extremely lucky that my wife, not only does she let me indulge in airplanes, she actually encourages it, because she knows it grounds me. And she'll join me, especially with the overseas trips. She'll come to all the air shows with me. She's all about the noise. I'm all about the jets and the airplanes and the photography, but she's there for the noise, so she loves the fast jets. And, of course, she came out to Greece with me for FanCon. Of course, she's there for the noise of the Phantoms, and let's face it, who isn't? She loves it as much as I do, so I have 100% support on pretty much everything I do as far as airplanes concerned. And my wife likes to fly, so she actually flies in green flag herself, so she's a sensor operator for Civil Air Patrol.
My wife actually comments the same way, you know, that my mom used to do, you know. So every time, you know, I get excited, you know, when I had a film developed and pictures printed, and you run over to your parents, you know, and you go like, "Oh, Mom, look at this," you know, and she's like, "Well, yeah, but that's the same one as this one." And you go like, "No, but this squadron patch on the tail is different than that one." I'm like, "Oh, okay, I don't see it." So yeah, my wife is essentially the same way, you know. So yeah, they don't see the differences, you know, that we do. And they don't get excited when we hear something on the radio crack and they're ready to go. You know, my adrenaline starts going.
The family puts up with it. My daughter has zero interest in it, She knows I do it, and she has no problem. My wife now puts up with it. This hobby almost cost me my marriage in the 80s. You dive into it so much that you end up spending way too much time pursuing the hobby and not enough time on your family. I know a lot of photographers in the hobbyist category who aren't married anymore, and it's specifically because of this. This is a time-consuming hobby. There are hundreds and hundreds of hours that you'll spend out in an airfield over and over and over again trying to catch what you're looking for. And it's very easy to get caught up in that, and your family suffers. I found out, in the early 90s that there's a balancing act to this, and I saved my marriage, but it was close. A lot of people haven't saved it. And I think that's the point where some people get a little too serious in this. If you're willing to dump your family, basically, in order to go out and get an airplane picture, I think that's taken the hobby just a little too seriously.
There was a perfect excuse after 9/11 to say, well, security dictates we're not going to let you onto the airfield or anybody else, versus being able to recognize now's the time where we need to be telling our story more. We need to have local media come in. We need to have people that understand what's going on that can tell our story. A lot of public affairs officers almost consider local folks as adversarial. They all want to have the big TV station, CBS News from New York, come in and do a positive report on whatever their unit is, but they neglect and almost ostracize their local base that are the supporters that get photos in the newspaper, that talk to pilots, that are almost recruiters. There's people that do that have a passion for photography and for aviation, that make great photos, that help people, the civilians, understand what's going on. There's a few folks that I personally know and that I see out in the DoD that do a really great job of keeping in mind the enthusiast, the hobbyist, the people that are out there to gawk at jets but also make great photos. One of the guys, he's a civilian public affairs officer for the Navy. He hosts an aviation day. It's very well organized, brings people out that he knows they have a passion for it. They get to see all kinds of cool stuff. They make great photos. They amplify the mission into the local community and around the country. And it's a win-win because he also asks, if you get some great photos, will you share them with us? So he gets photos from some of the top photographers that he can then put into his official products and show his command and show the Navy in a positive light. Didn't cost him anything. We've got to get back to a point where people recognize those kind of opportunities as in the public affairs field and leverage them. Because there's not enough people going into aviation. There's not enough pilots. There's not enough mechanics. There's not enough people that want to fuel jets or helicopters. There's not enough people that want to learn aerodynamics. We're competing against everything under the sun for people's attention, especially in those critical high school years and early college. So if we don't have something that's eye-catching, that's interesting, a great story that captures people's attention, then we're going to lose. And that's concerning to me because it is a passion for me, both photography and aviation. But when you consider the big picture of national defense and just aviation in general, we need more pilots to fly people around the country to conduct the business that occurs in the United States. We've got to be able to be mobile. We've got to have people that know what they're doing, fly great, get their passengers there on time, deliver weapons if it's military, etc. And we've got to get back to that. Everybody likes to have their picture taken. And when I was an Air Force photographer, I recognized that very quickly, that all pilots, they've got an ego. They want to have a great photo of them. But you have to be careful. And you have to, as a photographer, understand that sometimes appealing to somebody's ego is a negative thing. And I think we saw that out in the Star Wars Canyon in California, where you had photographers who discovered a great location to go and photograph, and they started making pictures of the pilots flying the low-level routes. And then the word quickly got out, and lots of photographers started showing up, and they also started coordinating behind the scenes. with the pilots. And they went so far as to coordinate with units in advance. So they were having people come through the low-level route that traditionally would not fly through that low-level route. Larger aircraft, adversary aircraft wearing cool paint schemes, and it got dangerous very quickly because you had these pilots that were coordinating and knowing that there's 50 photographers on a ridge. They're going to get great photos if I go through that pass upside down versus flying it, pushing over, and continuing in. And we actually lost an F-18E a few years ago where the pilot was being very aggressive and ended up impacting the ground, and loss of life of the pilot was devastating. But that's also a national asset for an F-18 aircraft that's, now smoldering metal in the middle of the desert. And I even told photographers at the time, I said, you have to be very careful about this because you're going to get somebody that's going to think going through there faster than the published airspeed is going to make a better photo, when actually probably doing it slower would be better for photos and for safety.
I had an acquaintance in a local post office that I had known for several years. He worked behind the counter. And I found out that he had been in the Navy and had been a bombardier navigator in an A6 intruder. He knew that I had photographed airplanes and enjoyed it, and he had no photographs of any aircraft he had ever flown in. So I asked him and got his logbook from him and went back and researched and looked through trying to match up to see if I had photographed any aircraft that he had in his logbook. And I found an entry, March of 1986, where there was a VA-75 A6 that landed at Navy Dallas, and I caught it. It was the only VA-75 A6 I ever saw. And it turns out that was him in that airplane. And it was in the afternoon, so I shot the right side of the airplane, so he was on the side facing me. And I went back and found the slide, and I was able to give him a print of that airplane from 30 years before. And it freaked me out. The coincidence of it just freaked me out at the time. But it was fun, and it kind of illustrates kind of why I do this, is just to kind of document these airplanes. And it was luck or happenstance or whatever that all that worked out. But it was quite a hoot to see him looking at himself in that picture.
Look at my t-shirt. It's the one airplane that got me inspired when I was a kid, the F-104 Starfighter. There are only very few flying nowadays. In Europe, for a very brief moment, there was one flying. It was a group in Norway that restored a two-seater to flying condition. In 2018, after I think 10 years of restoration, they finally got it to fly. Now, the Starfighter is a flying rocket. The Aviation photo crew team flies a Skyvan, a flying shoebox, with a maximum of 160 knots. That thing flies at a minimum of way more than that. So that was a first challenge, but the biggest challenge was basically to get in contact with them and get an agreement that they would be willing to give us a few flybys. Yeah, they were interested in all, and the guy who was overseeing the project was a former F-104 pilot. And he said, look, all right, we're going to see it, we're going to do you guys, we're going to do flybys at 230 knots in the central line, blah, blah, blah. All right, we go. So that's all I needed to know. Once we started off flying with the other guys, we were super lucky with the weather. It was a steel blue, wonderful summer evening. And I think at some point, you expect that a Starfighter is flying over the coast at like 10,000 feet. And all of a sudden we could track it. There was something coming in very fast at 1,500 feet over the water. And then obviously you hear it on the radio. So I can guarantee you when you see that in the end and you know it's gonna happen and you know it's gonna come to the Skyvan, that was probably the best moment I had so far. And then the first pass was already magic. But that second pass was directly in the center line at 200 feet. And the most magical thing happened is when it buzzed under us, we could hear the famous howl of the engine. And everyone in the Skyvan went like, we got it, we got it. And we were lucky enough to get 7 more passes before it finally landed. That was our best moment so far.
Early on, when I was doing photography, I had an opportunity to go to Barksdale. That was kind of our home plate there, and capture Tu-142M bears when they came in. There's a gentleman named Robert Hopkins. He's an author, and he called me up on the phone one day and said, hey, at the time he ran a magazine called Journal of Military Aviation. He says, I understand you live in that area. Would you mind going down there and taking some interior, exterior pictures of those bears? I said, well, absolutely, love to. And so I got to go down there and do that. The interesting part, because it was a magazine publication back then, not digital, you wanted it done in black and white. So I actually had to scrounge up another camera because I wanted some slides to get the color part of it. So I was able to take some exterior colors, but I wasn't able to do it inside just because I was jumbling. The Russian guys were shuffling us in and out and sort of things like that. And so those actually got published in Journal of Military Aviation. So that was one of the crowning jewels of things I got to do, probably the best to this point, I would say.
I was assigned to Shaw Air Force Base, the 20th Fighter Wing, at the time that 9/11 went down. And I'd been there for a significant amount of time, so that my photos had been out in the media and across the Air Force. And I remember when September 11th went down, the commander of Air Combat Command made a by name request that he wanted me to come from Shaw to document what was happening with the Combat Air Patrols. And so I was very quickly sent up to Washington, D.C., and I flew out of Langley for a few days. And I got to fly in F-15s and F-16s and document the time where the absolute airspace was closed except for the fighters that I was in and the tankers supporting us. And so one of my most famous photos to this day that is often used when you talk about Operation Noble Eagle is 2 F-16s from North Dakota flying over Washington, D.C., where you can see all of the major monuments and government facilities, including the Pentagon right between the two jets, where you can see where the airliner went in. That's been very rewarding personally and professionally, but I have kids now that are teenagers that look at that and say, hey, that's my dad's photo. And that's pretty cool.
I would have loved to have photographed the F-14 Tomcat, just because I hear so many stories, from him, from our photography buddies, just how fun of an aircraft that was to photograph, especially in the Naval Air Station Dallas days and the Carswell days. Just the mystique of that aircraft. Obviously, Top Gun made that aircraft very, very popular. It's just such a cool airframe and an aircraft to do.
I think my favorite subject was one that I never got a chance to take a picture of. My father flew the F-101 Voodoo over in England for 3 years. And that was such an impressive aircraft, and I have no active memory of it because I was so young. I've always missed not having had the opportunity to actively photograph those aircraft. They were gone before I got into the hobby. It saddens me, but the few Voodoos that are actually still on display, they're cool. I like seeing them and I like photographing them, even though they're just sitting there on a stick. I really wish that I'd had the opportunity to see those in actual service.
F-117, just because it's so elusive and it's made kind of a comeback. I've always been interested in the Black World aircraft. I love every aircraft there is out there, Tomcats, Hornets, Eagles, but something with the F-117, it has that mystique about it. Reading the story, knowing things about it. Always been a fan of that. I wasn't ever able to see a Blackbird fly. I was kind of beyond that when I was younger. I've been able to see a F-117, see it fly several times, catch it static, all those kind of good things. Hopefully in the near future we can see one flying. That would kind of put a really good finish to the F-117 as far as I'm seeing it.
The SR is always going to be the one airplane that I could never get enough of. I used to see it fly probably about once a month. No matter how many times I saw an SR fly, it was always the most exciting thing I think I'd ever seen. It was a sight to behold. It looks like it's doing 1,000 miles an hour just standing still. So that's my all-time favorite aircraft.
People may argue, that it's not necessarily a real airplane, but I would say the space shuttle launch. I've tried so many times, and every time I've went, it got canceled. So that's an extreme bummer. But I wish, that I could have seen, like a space shuttle launch. That would have been amazing.
The aircraft that I would have most liked to have flown in that I never got to would be an RF-4 Phantom. I actually flew in an F-4 Phantom E model, and that was very exciting. It was a dream come true because, as I mentioned, I grew up at one of the largest Air Force bases that had F-4 Phantoms as a kid. So they would fly over my house. I knew all about them, used to see them launch. Just amazing aircraft. But I never got to fly in an RF-4, which was a reconnaissance version that actually captured my attention. The crazy thing is they would launch to the south and turn to the west, which is where I lived in Austin. They would be climbing up to fly out to West Texas and do low-level runs. And I had a friend, his father was a navigator in RF-4s. So he educated me about what they would do, and it just seemed like the coolest mission. So RF-4 Phantom is the missed opportunity, but I did get to fly in an F-4, and that was pretty amazing because it's a beast of an aircraft. Got to do aerobatics, got to go Mach 1, got to do all kinds of cool stuff that most people would never get to do. And I was very lucky because that was actually a QF-4 when they were being used as drones. So sort of the tail end for the U.S. military's use of F-4s, but it was pretty awesome.
I'm still hooked, and I presume I'm going to be hooked on this until I'm no longer physically capable of doing it. I enjoy going out there and seeing the airplanes and getting the rush of seeing a jet and afterburner blow over my head and taking pictures of it. I still get a rush out of seeing somebody respond to a picture that I posted that I took 40 years ago and say, hey, I remember that airplane. I published a picture on Facebook of an F-4 Phantom from Fort Worth, and it was sitting down at the last chance waiting to take off. And it turned out that a guy responded to it who was flying it at the time. And he had no photographs of himself in that aircraft at all. And all of a sudden, here I am 35 years later, and I'm able to give him this photograph. That's fun, and that's got me hooked. And being able to contribute to the history of aviation. The pictures we take today are tomorrow's history. People in the military, with very few exceptions, very rarely use a camera. They very rarely take photographs of the aircraft or vehicles or whatever it is they're doing because it's their day-to-day job. It's not a big deal. So when people come along trying to document the history of aviation down the road, they're relying in large part to what we are doing now. Now, that might seem trying to make myself a little self-important here or whatever, but when somebody comes along looking for photographs of a Tomcat that flew out of Navy Dallas in the early 1990s, they're not going to find it in the Navy. They're not going to find it in official logs. They're going to find it in my slide books. And the ability to keep that history going is a lot of fun, and it's a reason to keep after it. I don't know how many more years I've got left in this, but as long as I can keep doing it, I'm going to keep going out there.
I'm predominantly photographing military aircraft, trying different locations within the vicinity of the airfield to give you that different angle that keeps it interesting. So, will you ever have enough pictures of an F-16? I don't know. For me, it's all about hanging out with your friends and talk about different things, that they've experienced in their hobby versus you. Different places that they have traveled versus where you have been. And especially if, when you're talking about, guys that do the same hobby as you do, that actually have been in the service, and even sometimes in a war zone, and be able to take pictures, from what these guys train for day to day, to be able to reflect that in a picture and take that home, and for me to be able to look at that. I always enjoy that.
I mentioned before that as a young kid, I used to go out with my grandfather to Bergstrom Air Force Base, and we would watch the airplanes from the end of the runway area. where we could drive up at that time and you could watch the Air Force taxi down a long taxiway, do their end of runway checks before taking off. As a kid, I would wave and wave and wave at these pilots. But the pilot was usually taxiing the aircraft, looking at his stuff, and the backseater was always running checklists. I remember that and understand fully now, having done it, the intensity of what's required. There was one time where I was waving and waving, and backseater looked up and just took a minute to wave, acknowledged me, and I mean, he was 50, 60 feet away. The jet was loud and they were about to turn, and he just took that fraction of a second. I think that moment in time is what actually said, man, I want to be that guy. I made a point in my career as an aerial photographer flying in the backseat of jets. There were some times where I knew there were photographers there. I knew there were kids there especially, where I would take that moment and wave at the kids, acknowledge them, wave at the photographers. I think part of what has driven me is knowing that over the years, I've had that impact on people. I've had kids come up to me and say, oh, I've seen your picture in Airman Magazine. That was really cool. And now I want to be a pilot, or I want to join the Air Force and be a pararescueman because I saw your photo of guys coming out of an HH-60G in Kuwait, and that was just super. That's pretty inspirational.
To do anything with your family is always awesome. To be able to share, any kind of experiences and beyond just what you do as a family. I never thought I'd have a buddy to be able to do that with. I've got my aviation friends that obviously we do that, and I've introduced him, and he's got to be their friends and peers as well, which is even cooler than that. A lot of the guys I've known and known him now, and and accept him as a peer as well. It's always fun to have somebody to talk to or share the experience with. And so I think that's the best part now is, if a B-1 flies by, it's cool to take a shot, but it's even better to have your son with it. He enjoys it even more than you do, We were at Shepherd for the air show a couple of years ago, and I saw a gentleman in a wheelchair, and his son was wheeling around showing the run. I said, well, Jordan, you're going to have to do that to me someday. He said, anytime, Dad. So that's always good to know that I may be in that wheelchair with my camera, but somebody's going to be pushing me that I know. So that's pretty cool.
Anytime you get to spend time with your dad and doing something that he loves, but also something that you love too, it's just a really special moment. It's for me, it's just, the quality time I get to spend with him, because obviously now, with me having a full-time job, being busy, it's harder to have that family time at home. And so it's something that me and him both were able to do together, and something that, we get to experience everything together. I mean, there's no one really else that I have, outside of the peers that he was talking about, that I can share that with. I tell my friends, as a hobby, I'm an aviation photographer. What's that? What's, it's not really that big of a deal to them, or, it's, they don't really get it. And I understand that. And it's just a big hobby of mine. And he's the only one that really gets it. I mean, who better just to have those experiences than your father? There's a photograph that, that I have that's on my desk at work that, it's a picture that me and him took. If you ever go to Nellis Air Force Base, at the entrance, there's basically a big statue of 4th Thunderbird in formation. And that was at our first red flag together. And that's something that I've cherished, that I keep really close to me, because that was a time where we both had gone to a place and doing something that we both really enjoyed and loved being at. And having those memories is something that that money or nothing can replace.